Hey, hi Mara.
Hi, Olga. Nice to electronically meet you.
Yes, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
My pleasure. I always enjoy talking about my movies, what I've been doing, my script consulting, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I am both a screenwriter and a producer. I always say I'm a screenwriter by choice, and I've been a producer of necessity. I am based in New Jersey in the United States. I wrote and produced two indie features. The first one was called Surviving Family, which is about a young woman from a very dysfunctional family who comes home to get married in 5 days. It's a story about living in a family that has alcoholism, mental illness, suicide, all that kind of troubling stuff. But it's actually, at least part of it is inspired by my mom's family. Her family did not have suicide, but it had just about everything else. And the lead guy in that movie is Billy Magnuson, who, since we made that, has gone on to do a lot of very high profile work, including Maniac, which is on Netflix now. He's in Aladdin. He's in Velvet Buzzfeed with Jake Gyllenhaal. He just got cast to the new Sopranos prequel, all that kind of good stuff. But aside from that, I'm very proud of the movie, and it takes a very good look at the issues of dealing with mental illness within your own family. The second one is much lighter. It's called Detours. It's a father-daughter road trip comedy, and it's about a woman who has to start over. She just found out her husband is gay, and that didn't do anything to help the marriage. So she's starting a new job in Florida, and she sets off on a road trip with her widowed father and her mother's ashes in a coffee can. And the idea is that she and her dad are going to scatter the ashes in Florida, which is where she's going to be working in the future. And that has a wonderful supporting cast that includes Richard Kind, who's very well known from a lot of American movies and television, Paul Sorvino, who was in Goodfellas, Michael Cerveris, who won the Tony Award for Fun Home on Broadway. So a lot of great, great actors in that. Beyond that, I do a lot of writing, and that falls into two different categories. One is I have been doing quite a bit of adapting people's stories into screenplays. So a lot of people have the idea for a screenplay, but don't actually know how to go about writing one. So they'll give me, let's say, anywhere between a page and 10 pages of notes as to what they want. And then I turn that into a screenplay for them. One of them, I have my fingers and toes crossed, looks like it's actually going to get produced. I'm actually working with a guy in Australia who's working on getting a producer for it. I can't talk too much about it except to say that it's a thriller that involves environmental issues. So I'm pretty excited about it. So I do a lot of that. And then the pure script consulting work is I take people's screenplays and make them better. It's as simple as that. That can be giving people notes on what the strengths and weaknesses are, or it can be taking the actual file and editing it to make the dialogue tighter, to fix the formatting. A lot of people have a lot of problems working with screenplay format rules. I fix the grammar, the punctuation, the spelling, the word usage, all that kind of stuff, but mostly leave the story unchanged. So that's, short question, long answer.
Now, I would love to have a chat to you about screenwriting, in particular, writing to attract great actors, because I have noticed that you do have, I mean, two indie films, and yet you've attracted quite a high level of actors to these projects. So, screenwriting wise, can we have a little chat about what you think is important?
There's a couple of things that I think are very important. One is I pride myself on writing realistic dialogue, um, things that sound the way people actually talk. And one of the things that I do a lot is I eavesdrop. When my husband and I go out to eat, I always get the people watching spot, the spot where I can hear the next table arguing, or the guy asking the girl if she'll go out with him a second time, all that kind of thing. I love to listen to the way people talk in real life. So that's one of the things that I do. Another, but I think one of the most important things, and we've done this with several projects, is if you want an actor who's known enough to be recognizable to the audience, but really kind of out of your league a little bit, pitch to them something that's different from what they usually do and what they're known for. And the perfect example of that is Michael Cerveris, who plays a love interest with us in Detours. And he generally plays the heavy in a lot of places. He plays very, very serious roles. We gave him a role that was basically a romantic comedy role. And it was perfect. And that is exactly the way we pitched it. We pitched it as you're the guy who gets the girl. And he never gets the girl.
Do you go through his agent, or do you try to find some common relationship?
Normally, that's a real, it depends. In that case, we went through the agent, and in fact, it's one of my favorite stories, and my friend laughs and gets embarrassed every time I tell her. But Tara Westwood, who plays the daughter, the lead female role in Detours, is also in my movie Surviving Family, and she came on board on Detours as a producer in addition to being a actor, basically because she knows everybody. I mean, I've never met somebody who knows people. And I said, look, come on board. You'll get creative input, and you'll get to, reach out to some people who you've always wanted to work with. Yeah. So what ended up happening was, so she was the one who knew Richard Kind, and she reached out to him directly. So she's the reason we got him. Michael Cerveris, she happened to run into his agent at a cocktail party.
So
and she not all prepared. And she called me and she said, oh my God, what do I do? I said, well, clearly you're going to pitch him. She said, how am I going to do that? And I said to her exactly what I just said to you. I said, tell him to tell Michael that this is totally different than everything he ever gets. It's a fun chance for him to do something completely different. And so the guy said, okay, send me the script in the morning, which that's the whole thing, is you got to get them to at least read the script. And 2 days later, he was on board.
Wow.
The next thing, and I'll give you a great example. I've never even reached out to this actor, but if I ever have the chance, he's one of the people who I would dream of having in one of my movies, is Clive Owen. And I listened to an interview with him. He generally does dark, serious, brooding roles, and I love him. And somebody asked him in an interview, why don't you ever do a romantic comedy? He said, nobody's ever offered me one. Wow. Yeah. So my dream is to write a romantic comedy and cast Clive Owen in it. Beyond that, you got to have a good script. I mean, in all seriousness. And the point where my stomach starts to go into loop-de-doops is when the casting agent, or in this case, Tara, will call me and say, okay, he or she is reading the script right now. And that's when I get nauseous because, of course, at that point, there's nothing further I can do. The script is written. But, it's really, at this level, it's not like I can shovel money at people. So you got to get them interested enough to read the script, but then it has to be a good script. So I also really work to make interesting characters and different and multi-layered, and have something for people to say that's maybe a little bit different and off the beaten path. And I always tell people, avoid stereotypes, and that has nothing to do with political correctness or anything like that. It's simply because it's not interesting. Getting an actor to play, a stereotypical, there's nothing wrong with being a certain type of person, but if you don't have any layers beyond that, it's just not interesting for an actor, and it gives them nothing to actually chew on. So I always try to make my characters multi-layered, and there's something that's going to come out about them that you didn't know when you walked in the door. And that's really it. Now, once you've done that, as you kind of alluded to, you have to be able to get them interested. And honestly, I do believe very strongly in hiring a casting director, because you're really paying that person for their contacts. That honestly, that's if you get a good one, they've been doing this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and they know all the agents, and the agents are willing to send good people to them. So I used the same agent for both of my features, a woman named Caroline Sinclair, who's been in the business for a long time in New York. She casts commercials as well as features and shorts. And she really brings wonderful people to the table. One of the actress who pretty much almost steals Surviving Family is a wonderful character actress by the name of Phyllis Somerville, who's been in movies like Little Children and Benjamin Button, and she's currently has a supporting role on Broadway in To Kill a Mockingbird. And she's a 75-year-old woman who is knock your socks off great. And Caroline, our casting director, had worked with her numerous times and was able to reach out to her agent, and she signed on for the role. And she's just so good. She plays a character named Aunt Mary, who's basically the wise woman. She's the truth teller who, about 3/4 of the way through the movie, tells our star the real truth about her family and why things went the way they did. And we got her for a 2-day shoot. We shot her scenes in my parents' living room. I sent my parents to the beach, so they were out of the way. And the interesting thing about that shoot was that she was very easy to work with. The one thing that her agent said was once I could have any 2 days during our schedule, they knew what our schedule was. It was a 20-day shoot. They said, you can have any 2 days you want, but you can't change them. So, and if you've worked on an indie movie, people are always changing schedules. So I actually put her for the last 2 days of our shoot, figuring let's let everything else be chaotic up until then, and we save her to the end. And she's absolutely wonderful. And she came back and did a small role in Detours also. So, but I do really think, I think a lot of people at the indie level, at the low budget level, want to save money on hiring a casting director because they figure, oh, I can do it myself. I'll use Actors Access or whatever the European or Australian equivalent is. And the bottom line is, sometimes you've got to get your foot in the door. If you have a great script, and even if you've got some money to pay people, you have to be able to reach out and get the agents to take you seriously. And they can be the hardest part because actors just want to act. Actors really want, you give an actor a great role, they're going to jump at it. Agents are really the gatekeepers in a lot of ways. They're the ones who are in charge of making sure that their client is going to get paid at the end of the day, and they're the ones who will sometimes say no, even if the actor wants to say yes. So, and that's, you certainly have to have all your ducks in order.
So just on that, what about a really low budget independent film where they just don't have the funds to either go through a casting director, and if they have funds to pay the casting director, they don't necessarily have funds to pay the actors? Would a casting director be involved in that process?
Well, it's, what I would say is, look, let's say you've got 10 characters, 10 roles, 10 things you need to cast, and you want to get a recognizable actor for one of those roles. Just hire the casting director to cast that one role. Don't ask them to do, if you can do 9 of the roles yourself, you could probably get a casting director for just a small amount of money to work with you on casting those couple of roles. So casting that one role, and that'll save you a ton of money. Now, I don't know how it works in Australia, but in the US, once you're into dealing with name actors, by definition, you're dealing with the union as well. So that opens up an entire different, set of issues in terms of they will require you to make sure that you have the money set aside to pay the actors. Even if you only have one union actor, you still have to work with the union. So that's really another subject entirely. But it is something that's very important. And at least in the US, it's something that you have to be very aware of when you're working at an indie level. And you just can't get a recognizable actor and not be dealing with the union.
And how long did it take you to write each of your projects?
Surviving Family took me probably 2.5 years, off and on. And Detours probably about a year. It took less time, partly because I was a little bit more confident by that time. Um, and also it's a little bit of an easier project. A father-daughter road trip is a little bit less straining at my own emotions than, mental illness and suicide. What happened with Surviving Family was I had already done several shorts at that point, and I started working on Surviving Family. I got about 30 pages written, and I sent it to a young woman who had directed several of my shorts. Her name is Laura Tees. She's a German woman who was going to grad school here in New York at the New School. And I sent it to her and basically said, "What do you think?" And she came back to me a day later. She said, "If you ever get a chance to produce this, I would really love to direct it." And then I was like, "Oh, okay." So at that point, the mere fact that I had somebody who truly, and I'd already worked with her on several projects, so I knew she was smart and reliable and organized and all those things you have to be to make an indie feature. It kind of put a different spin on it. And that was the point when I really started to think about how I was going to make this whole thing work. But yes, about 2.5 years writing Surviving Family, about a year on Detours. Both of them, we're going through revisions right up till when we were shooting and even on set.
And are there things as a producer that you learned on set while filming with your next project that you will think about that when screenwriting your next?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest things I learned about screenwriting when producing Surviving Family is, okay, Surviving Family it's a multi-generational story that includes, like a grandfather, a father, and a child, and people appear in flashbacks. You've got things that go back 30 years, it goes forward and back in time. I had to have casting, person X as a 10-year-old and then a 30-year-old. And then I had to have that person's dead mother and the mother's mother and the mother's sister. And our casting director was phenomenal. And I should have taken photos of her with all the headshots laid out across the table. You have all these people who had to be part of this extended family over, 40 years of time. Not only did I do that complication, I also had large groups of actors in multiple places. So because it was a family, I had multiple things which would have 6 or 7 people in a scene. So you had to have so many people on so many different days. I learned to try to give people a day or two to shine. So instead of having a supporting actor in shooting for 10 days, where they would maybe have 10 minutes of screen time, the next time I wrote it so they got that 10 minutes of screen time in 2 days. Because between the money to pay them multiple days and the time involved in moving them to multiple places, it was a logistical nightmare that I had created. So try to concentrate the amount of time that you need each given actor. Try to have a day. Plus, that way you can also write them one scene where they shine instead of 3 scenes where they're part of the scene. And then every actor wants to shine. They want that scene for their reel. So if you give them one scene that you can shoot in one day, it's going to save you money and headache. And that was a huge thing that I learned. From doing Detours, I don't think I would ever do a road movie again. I mean, what we did was, so it goes from New York all the way down to Florida. And my niece was going to college in Florida at the time, and we have a scene at the end where we scatter the ashes off the boats. And she arranged that for us. She was in a Marine Search and Rescue group at Eckerd College in Florida, and she got the boat, she got the people, she drove the boat, she set up the whole thing. So what we did was we shot basically all the interiors in New York and New Jersey over 2 weeks, and then we cut the crew down to the bare bones, and we hit the road, and we literally drove the route that's in the movie from New York down to Florida, and we shot exterior. Yeah, it is. It looks gorgeous. Let me tell you, it looks beautiful. Our DP was phenomenal. I would never do it again.
Yeah. How long was that trip?
It's about a 1,000-mile drive. We did it. We did it. I guess we did it over 3 days, and then we had to. But we also had to. We also did some overnights with shoots in Savannah, Georgia, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and then we spent a couple of days in Florida shooting exteriors in Florida. It was insane. It was, given the story, it was the way to do it. But we did some wonderful movie tricks. Like there's a scene, the main character who Tara Westwood plays has been an actress for her whole career, and she has now gotten an MFA and is moving into theater management. That's part of the setup of the story. There's a scene where she is arriving at the place where she's going to be working, greeting her boss, but she stands on the stage and basically takes in the fact that she's not acting anymore. Her acting days are done. The interior of that scene we shot in New Jersey, and the exterior of the theater we shot in St. Petersburg, Florida. So she walks into it in Florida, and then you're in New Jersey. And that was, quite a challenge to put together, something that where you could, on a practical basis, match the exterior and the interior and have it be believable to an audience that this is one building. But I don't think I would ever do a road trip movie again. I love the movie. I'm absolutely delighted with it, but I don't know that I would do that again.
Yeah. So when you come across other people's scripts that you're either reviewing or editing or doing any of your wonderful work on, what are some common, mistakes that you see?
Probably the single most common mistake that I see, and one that is really easy for screenwriters to fix if they just think about it, is you can only put things in a script that an actor can act. Okay? So you can't put Olga leaned back in her chair and remembered the time her mother gave her ice cream for breakfast. You can't act that. You can act if we do a flashback and we get 3-year-old Olga and Olga's mom in a flashback, but you can't act remembering the time your mother gave you ice cream for breakfast. There's nothing you can do but screenwriters do it all the time. They want, and then they'll do, that's it. They have things in characters' heads that they want to be on the screen, and you just can't do it.
So it's almost like a novel, where
yes.
you're reading a novel and it's up to the reader's imagination, but you can't necessarily get that on screen.
You can't get it on screen, and that's a great example, because that's one of the reasons why there's often such a split between the way a popular novel is when you read it yourself and what the movie adaptation is like. And I think that's a lot of why people are often disappointed, because characters can have very rich internal lives, and unless you film fantasy sequences, that's just not going to work. You can't put that into a movie. That's the single biggest thing, remembering, wishing. You can't act wishing, you can't do it. That's the single biggest thing. The other thing that I see a lot, again, very easy to fix, is writers will put into their script music that they want included. And first of all, it's usually something very famous that you don't have a prayer in hell of getting, unless Sony is going to do your budget for $50 million. But it's also a bit off-putting to a producer who then looks at it and says, well, I can't put that in, what does this person really think that I can do? It creates an awkward tension between a writer and a producer that really shouldn't be there. The other thing that's very, very common is that writers put in direction, the things that a director should do, close up on, cut to, the camera swirls and focuses on. That's not your job as a screenwriter. And not only is it not your job, if you're writing a spec script, meaning one that you want to try and sell to somebody else to get them to produce, it's quite off-putting because they'll look at it and you're not going to look professional. If you're writing something that you and your friends are going to make and you're going to direct, then fine, put anything into it that you want. But if you want to write a professional script that you're going to try and bring a real director and a real producer on board to make, just write the screenplay. Don't do the director's job for them. Characters tend to be very long-winded in movie screenplays. Monologues are okay in stage on theater, but you will very rarely see a successful movie where people give long speeches. It just doesn't really, it's a snoozer on screen. And in real life, with the exception of me talking to you here, we don't really talk that way. I'll say, if you and I were having coffee together, you would say a sentence or two, I would say a sentence or two. It would go back and forth. Maybe the waiter would come by and see if we wanted more coffee or a pastry. It's not people giving 10-sentence speeches. And that's the way we writers like the sound of our own words too much. And that's part of it. So I will go through and I will try to really brutally trim the dialogue down. Now, having said that, I'm as guilty as anybody else is. Before we shot Detours, the director and I sat down and red penciled my script, and we went through, literally word by word. It's not even always sentences. It's don't need that word, don't need that word, don't need that word. Just to make it as trim and tight as you possibly can. Don't waste screen time on what a friend of mine calls blubber. Just babble, babble, babble. Everything that's in there should be in there for a reason and be moving the story forward in one way or another.
Is there anything screenwriting-wise that you think new screenwriters would benefit from?
Start with shorts. Don't jump into a feature, in all seriousness. We all want to write features. We all want, novelists want to write the next great American novel. We just had the Oscars out today. Everybody wants the feature. Everybody wants, the next great feature. Start with something very small and very simple. Start with something where you have a location. I mean, again, I don't know what happens in other countries, but in the U.S., once you get a location outside of your own home or maybe a friend's home, you have to get liability insurance. So you've already ratcheted up the cost of your production right there. Just keep it as simple as possible and avoid logos. That's the other thing. Everybody don't go. It's not that you can't show anything in passing. If the car drives by and it says Toyota, that's not a problem. But, you don't want to show Toyotas cause crashes or something like that. It's just be careful of things. And the other thing I would say, just to kind of put my producing hat on here for just a moment, is the most important, if you decide to make a movie, whether it's a short or a feature, you can never spend too much time planning it out. The more that you can plan out every single day of the shoot, every single location, every aspect of it, every time you need to move the camera, everything you do, you'll save yourself so much time, because if you don't have to plan that while you're on set, paying a DP and a sound person and a makeup person and the actors and everything else. If you know that ahead of time, you're going to save yourself time. I shot both of my features in 20 days. I've heard of people doing it in 15 or 16 days if they don't take, and then they don't take any break in the middle. They go like 16 days straight with no day off. And the reason I think is because you can save a little bit of money on the camera equipment rental. So you can basically do 2 8-day weeks and you save a week of rental.
Yeah.
But the more you can plan it all out, every single bit, the more money you'll save and the more money you'll have to spend on things that really matter, like the actors and feeding the actors. You have to, you
Very
cannot,
important.
you have to, if you don't feed your actors and you don't feed your crew, you're going to have a lot of very unhappy people who are not going to give you good work.
So tell us where we can find your films and where we can find more about you online.
My movie Surviving Family is on Amazon Prime in the US, the UK, Canada, and Germany. My director was German, so it's out there in Germany. It is on an iTunes in a number of countries, and I always forget the full list, but definitely all of those. I believe also Hong Kong, possibly Australia, um, and Switzerland. It's on iTunes. Detours is on Amazon Prime in the US, the UK, and Canada, and it's on Vimeo on demand, which means it's worldwide. Anybody anywhere in the world who has an internet connection, it costs 99 cents to rent. I figure people should be willing to splurge on a 99-cent rental without knowing too much about the movie. It also, by the way, has a fantastic soundtrack. If people are into music. I have a website, which is maralesemann.com. Very simple. First name, last name.com. And I'm on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at mlesemann@twitter.com. I have a couple of projects that I've got my fingers and toes crossed are really going to come to fruition, and I'll be writing about them and posting about them. Oh, and I'll mention one other thing. I am going to be teaching for people who are in the US, at least on the East Coast of the US, I'm teaching a 1-hour seminar at the Philadelphia Writers Conference in July about being a beginning screenwriter and what it's like to put your stuff down on paper. So if you go to my website, maralesemann.com, you'll see more about that there, and maybe people can come out and hear me talk a little bit more about exactly that. And there is on my website, there is a spot where people can click and contact me, either if they have a question or if they want to learn more about my services, just send me a note, and I always respond.
Great. Thank you so much.
Olga, it's been a pleasure.